Welcome back to The Explorer. I'm your host, Jonathan Hayes. Today we close out something special. It was the third and final installment of our Iditarod EDU Speaker Series conference this summer, recorded live in Poland Spring Resort here in Maine. We started this series with my talk on the Centennial Seppala Expedition, and then Kat Langlais, the first woman to ever win the Can-Am Crown 250, gave us a hard, honest look at what it really takes to win. And now we finish with a man who has quite literally lived the entire history of the Iditarod, Urtha Lenhar. Urtha was there on day one, the very first Iditarod, present at the beginning of what would become the toughest race on earth. He went on to become an Iditarod finisher himself. He spent 40 years as a teacher, 20 of those years in Nome, Alaska, right at the end of the trail. And today, he's the president of the nonprofit Seppala House Project, working to restore Leonhard Seppala's house and to preserve it as a museum for generations to come. He covers a lot of ground: the birth of the Iditarod, what it takes to run it himself, his fight to save a piece of history before it's gone, and everything in between. Urtha's got a lot of stories, and he's not shy about sharing them. And this one's personal for me too. I partnered with the Seppala House and took up a team of carpenters to Nome to work on the Seppala House a couple of years ago. And so I had my hands on it. When Urtha talks about what that house means to him, I'm not just listening and a podcast host. I stood in the house with a hammer in my hand. So listen in and let's get into it.
I'm a retired teacher. I taught for 40 years. 20 years in Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised, and 20 years in Nome. So I was in Nome for the very first Iditarod. And since then, I've been involved with Iditarod for 47 years. One of those years, of course, I ran the race and finished in 1991. And so what I'm going to do today is, Jonathan, I'm going to wing it.
Wing it.
I'm going to talk about early Iditarod, and I'm going to talk about my Iditarod, and I'm going to talk about the future and where I'm at with the future. When I lived in Nome, and there was scuttlebutt all the 1972 about these guys in Anchorage trying to get together a dog thing coming up to Nome. And at that time it was unheard of because of the wilderness area. There was a Iditarod trail that was put in back in the early time when Alaska was first found gold. And that they had markers that they used to bring the mail into Nome. And so 60, 100 years later, all those markers got down, but they sort of knew where the trail was. And Joe Reddington lived in Connecticut. And Joe Reddington saw that snowmobiles were taking over. And he wanted to bring back the spirit of Alaska by having dogs. Joe was a homesteader, actually came from Pennsylvania, and he ends up getting together some people down in Anchorage and Wasilla to spur up the idea of running dogs from Anchorage to Nome, stopping at villages, primarily the villages, to get the villagers interested in bringing back their dogs. And because most of the villagers were all using snow machines then. And so in Nome, he needed some contact. Well, one of the contacts that he had was my butcher. We had one grocery store up there, and right down on Front Street, the man that we would go to get our meat that would come in every 2 weeks, and was Howard Farley. So Howard Farley ended up being the contact in Nome. Also in Nome was Nome's future mayor, Leo Rasmussen. And Leo ended up being on the committee to help decide what we're going to do in Nome, how we're going to, and they decided they would mark the trail get a group of people and try to backtrack and mark the trail from Nome down halfway to McGrath. Joe would work with his team coming forward. Well, it ended up being that Joe's team ended up having more knowledge and faster guys, and they ended up coming further than McGrath. So that's how the race got started. So the scuttlebutt in Nome at the time was these guys are never going to make it, you know. But they did have quite a few mushers sign up to do it. At that time, they were using 12 and 14-foot basket sleds. And they carried a gear on it that would last them from Anchorage to McGrath, which is the halfway point almost. And so these sleds didn't have the nice nylon runners like we have today. They had steel runners on them. And we talked a little bit about steel runners yesterday. And so these sleds were extremely heavy. If you look at the earlier pictures of the dogs that they used back in that time, they were much bigger. I mean, they were heavy dogs and they were meant for pulling, but they were also interested in one thing, and that's pulling somebody to Nome. You know, it wasn't really a race, it was just see whether we could do this. So back in Nome, I helped out with Leo Rasmussen, who was a friend of mine, do the logistics on our end as to how we're going to get together and put this whole thing together. And the race happened. And first musher that came in, we were not prepared for it. As a matter of fact, the musher's coming down Front Street, gets past the Board of Trade bar, and we didn't know where the finish line was. So somebody, and I don't know who it was right now, I remember I was standing there, they said, I'm going into the Bering Sea Saloon and get a pitcher of Kool-Aid. They got a pitcher of Kool-Aid, brought it out, spilled it across, and that was the finish line.
Holy cow. Oh my gosh.
That was the finish line for Iditarod.
That's so cool.
Now, years later, because of my involvement in volunteering every year, I befriended Joe Reddington and Norman Vaughn, who would run the race. And Joe would stay at my house. I mean, back then, mushers stayed at people's houses. They didn't have the hotels that they stayed in. Townspeople wanted a musher to stay there. And so I hosted Joe Reddington a number of years, and then after a while, I ended up teaching up in Kotzebue, Alaska, which is above Nome, and Joe would come up there and run the Kobuk 300 and stay at my house. So we got to be really good friends. And every year, Joe would say, why don't you run this race? And I said, you are crazy. He said, I'm a teacher. I'm warm inside. I can go out for a couple hours and watch you guys come in and have a blast, but there ain't no way I'm out there at 30 and 40 below with dogs for 2 weeks. And every year, Joe would bug me about it. Then Norman Vaughn comes along. Norman ended up being the oldest and the slowest dog musher on the Iditarod Trail. But Norman had a personality that was just to die for. He was a fun, jovial, very typical New England gentleman. And Norman got to be good friends with me through Joe, and I sponsored Norman to stay at my house a number of times. And Norman would bug me about, you need to do this race, you need to do this race. And I kept saying, same thing I told Joe. No, I'm staying in where it's warm. I don't want to do the race. I'll help you guys as much as I can. So one night, in Nome, there's not much to do. There's 7 bars, and all on Front Street. And we were sitting around at a bar talking, and Joe and Norman said, Urtha, why don't you run this race? Come on, come on. We can help you get dogs. We can do all this. And I just said, the only way I'd ever do that race is by snowmobile.
Oh.
And that was a mistake. Because the next morning, I had a phone call from the executive director of Iditarod, who lived in Nome and was a friend of mine, Rosemary Phillips. And Rosemary said, hey, Lenhar, what are you doing tonight? And I said, I haven't got any plans. She said, CJ and I are going to cook some steaks on the grill. Would you like to come down for dinner? I want to talk to you. Okay. So I went down there, and CJ went out on the deck and cooked some nice steaks, and we had a meal. And Rosemary looks at me after the meal, and she goes, so the other night at the bar, you said that you wanted to do this race by snowmobile. I said, yeah, I was kidding. She goes, I'm not. She says, I'm a photographer, you're a photographer, and I was thinking, this is before Jeff Schultz. This is before Mr. Brown, who's photographing the race, that these checkpoints had never been seen by a lot of people. And so Rosemary and I kicked the idea around of putting a snow machine group together, and we photographed the race from the beginning to the end, the checkpoints, everything else. And she said, CJ has already called a friend of his, and Chevron said they would donate all the fuel.
Wow.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, long story short, we did the race by snowmobile. It was amazing. It was terrible. Mushers were passing us. We were stuck in the overflow. We were stuck in the snow. We couldn't run the snow machines up the mountains. We had to get up and push them as we were. So at the end of the race, we did come in a couple of hours before the first musher came in, and at that time, Wide World of Sports was covering Iditarod and covering it, religiously. And Lynn Swan, who used to be a pro football player, was the narrator, the working for Wide World of Sports. So we're coming down Front Street, going in under the arch. They now have an arch, and we'll talk about that later. But Lynn interviews me and says, so, what did you think about coming up here by snowmobile? I said, I'll never do that again. And he said, why? And I told him about the heartaches that we had with it. And I said, next time I do this, jokingly, it'll be by dog team. And Joe Reddington heard that. And the next morning, Joe called me down for breakfast, and he says, we need to talk. He says, we're going to have you do this race. And I said, no, I don't think so. He goes, yeah. He says, and I had just gotten off of these grueling snow machines, and it had been the first time anyone had driven a snowmobile from Anchorage to Nome. So it was a trail. If you talk about trail breakers, it was something. So long story short, Norman and Joe were my mentors. They were the ones that taught me how to dog mush. They were the ones that helped me put a team together. I had a trainer. If it wasn't those two training me, Linda Plattner, we'd go up to Lacey Mountain and train up there, and took off school for a year and a half, and I ended up training for Iditarod. And Norman and I would stay out at Trapper Creek, where his cabin was, all winter and train. And it never dawned on me what I had committed to until in Anchorage, the week or 2 weeks before the Fur Ronde, there are banners that look like the shield of the Iditarod shield that you have. And they are line up the streets. They're on every lamppost. And you know, you go downtown, you're driving down, do whatever, you see them all the time. And I kind of blocked it out of my mind until one day Norman and I were going down for breakfast at Blondie's Cafe right on 4th Avenue, and the Iditarod shield lined the streets. That banner had been changed to Iditarod shields, and then realized that, uh-oh, this is me. And so, again, I ran the Iditarod. It was fun. it was hard. I can tell you a little bit about the race start. Was really good right out of downtown Anchorage. I'm not sure what we got here. Oh, there's Joe and I. Joe and I and his wife became very good friends. There's Norman. Norman was 95 years old at this picture. I hadn't seen him in like 12 years. And this was at the Eating Center where they had a big banquet and everything. And Norman was sitting at a round table with all these people to get his autograph. I mean, he was just very famous. And I was up above on looking down from where he was. I thought, man, I'll never be able to go up and talk to him. This is my buddy. And so finally, I decided, what the heck? I went down, got on the floor, walked around all the people, big line that was there, and I come up to Norman, and back of Norman where the lady was standing there getting an autograph, and I said, I'm looking for an old musher. And Norman, in his New England accent, turned around and he's, Urtha, where in God's name have you been? And so he was sharp as a tack, and we got to get reacquainted. And so he was a good old soul. He died at 100 years old. When Rosemary and I photographed the race, we actually were the official Iditarod photography team. That was 1978. 1978. In Nome is another of Seppala's dogs. This is the best taxidermy animal I've ever seen in my life. This is a dog called Fritz. He was Togo's running partner and Balto's running partner, and owned by Seppala. And we just got him maybe about, oh my, time goes by so quick, 15 years ago. And he is in a Nome museum now. So there I am, going down Front Street. I was sponsored by Kit's Camera. And yes?
God, remind us the year, please.
What's that?
What year are we in again? The year.
1991.
What's that?
91. He wants to know the year.
What year? 78.
So this is 70.
This was 91.
91.
78 is when I did the photography. So Kit's Camera sponsored me. At that time, they were one of the first that allowed someone to ride in the sled. We didn't have Iditarod riders. My sponsor wanted to film my takeoff and everything, so she's in the sled with her movie camera, and off we go down Front Street, or 4th Avenue.
Who was behind you?
That is one of, oh God, I forget his name. One of Linda Plattner's friends who I trained with. He had to have a second sled to slow the teams around through the streets of Anchorage. And back then, I was probably the first one that had my handlers and myself color-coded. I went to Gary King. That was, somebody asked about what store it was. It was Gary King's. They're not in operation in Anchorage anymore. I went in Gary King, and I was going to buy a raincoat. And inside they had these huge circular things with stuff hanging on them that was lime green, and it was all on sale. And the fleece jackets, this is all Columbia stuff. The fleece jackets were like $12.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought,
Isn't that great?
let's see, I had 8 handlers. That's not much money. I went ahead and bought 8 of them for my handlers. I walked around a corner and they had lime green outfit that was winterized, one of those ones that you can change, put on a parka that's lime green. So when I came up to the starting line, everyone was going, boy, they won't miss him if he all falls off. And Rick Swenson went by me when we were first going up to the starting line. Rick's team went before me, and he walked by and took a double take. He goes, God, Lenhar, he said, we're going to find you. So we started out. Oop, I shouldn't be here yet. And I finished in, let's go back and do some Iditarod work. Going up to Rainy Pass was raining and sleety and icy. And so glad to get to the top, and camped out that night and was very, very happy the next morning with the bright sun everywhere. It lights up the snow, and you definitely need sunglasses on. My team was happy, fed them, gave them some water. They were anxious to go. I hooked them up, and off we go towards the Dazel Gorge. And outside of Rainy Pass, there's a big, tall hill. And I'm working my dogs going up this hill, and it was pretty steep, and they were digging into the wet snow and everything. And all of a sudden, I hear, on by, and I look behind me, and a team is trying to pass me on this hill. So I stop my team. The most embarrassing part of my whole dog life, I was passed by a dog team of poodles. John Suter was the only musher who had real standard poodles. And he ran 2 years after that before he was banned from Iditarod because of the dog's fur would stick to the ice and snow when they would sleep, and it was just not conducive to good health for the dog. But what an embarrassment. So I get top anyhow, and I look, and there's this beautiful, gorgeous valley. I mean to tell you, the pictures don't do it justice looking down from up there. And it was such a beautiful day. And I started down, and I'm thinking in my mind, everybody said, this is awful. This is terrible. And I'm thinking, this is like skiing. I mean, and way down below, I mean, I still had a long ways down below, I see a river, a nice river. And across that river was just like, it looked like a landing strip from in an airplane. But it went across that river. And I thought, I wonder if that's where I have to cross. And sure enough, I get down. Dazel Gorge at the bottom is rocky. That's what they hate. Oh. And those rocks aren't much wider than a sled. So you're bouncing off, bouncing back and forth. I didn't wreck the sled. I did wonderful. Team did great. And now I see that is a bridge. It's an ice bridge that they made for Iditarod going across to the other side of the trail. The river was running very strong, 35 below that morning, but it was so sunny, it seemed like it was like 30 above. And my dogs set up for that bridge really nice. I mean, they were lined up perfect. And my back runners got on that bridge. I thought, this is cool. The only problem is, right at the edge of at the end of that bridge, the trail makes a sharp right. And on a dog team, you're like a tractor and trailer. If you're making a sharp right, you have to get your dogs to go out and come in. Well, they didn't know that. They just sucked me right in off that bridge, and they were on the trail, and I fell off into the river. 6 of my dogs in the river. And the river's up to here, 30 below, and my only concern was my dog. You know, because they're in there not knowing what to do, and I got it. Half of them, more than half of them, up on the trail where they should be, stopped, looking around, going, what the heck's going on here? So I didn't worry about the cold, didn't even think about the cold, and God pulled my harnesses and pulled the dogs up, pulled the gang line up to the shoreline, got them all up. Now I had to get the sled up. The sled's wet. And so it weighs probably another half as much as it weighed before. So I worked up a good sweat getting everything up and straightened the dogs out, anchored them down so on the trail so that they would be okay, and brushed the ice and snow off the sled bag. And then I thought, you're cold. You know, all of a sudden it turned around on me. I got to deal with me. And I was sponsored also by Northern Outfitters. Northern Outfitters had just come out. And the guy who invented Northern Outfitters was a friend of mine from Orem, Utah. And the deal with Northern Outfitters clothing at that time was the basic part of the clothing that kept you warm was basically foam insulation. It was a foam rubber all around you. And the idea behind that is air is the best insulation. So the more air you have around you, the easier it is to stay warm. And you go into this outfit wearing just polypropylene underwear. And so you don't have blue jeans on because blue jeans is cotton. Cotton absorbs moisture. Moisture doesn't wick anything out. Moisture against your body in the cold makes you get frostbite and makes you get hypothermia. So here I am, 30 below, freezing, ice. My blue outfit, I had a blue Northern Outfitters outfit. It was white from the ice. And so out there in the middle of nowhere, I'm taking off my bibs, pulling down. All I have on is a polypropylene underwear. And the deal with Northern Outfitters products is, according to the owner, the guy that made them, is you wring it out like you do a sponge. And he swore that if you wrang it, everything out, got most of it out, the moisture, a little bit of moisture would still be there. You know how it is when you have a towel and you wring it out, it's still damp. Yeah. And you put that on, it's cold. It's going to be cold. But Northern Outfitters is designed to wick the moisture away from the body. And within 3-4 minutes after I put this cold, damp, cold stuff on, I was feeling uncomfortable. So we mushed into the next checkpoint, and I was ready to go into the cabin and thaw out my clothing. I didn't have to. It was dry. My outfit had turned white again, not because of ice and frost, but because the moisture had wicked out and was out the outside. I just go like this, it would just be like snowflakes everywhere. Wow. So I became the poster guy for Northern Outfitters, because that got back to the owner before I even got off the Iditarod Trail, that their clothing had worked. Wow. So, and then later on, a year later, I ended up working for Northern Outfitters. And I told them they had it all wrong. They were selling stuff out of Orem, Utah. And where were they getting most of their sales? Alaska. So where would you have a store?
Alaska.
There you go. I set up 2 stores, one in Anchorage, one in Fairbanks, and I had 27 distributors in all the villages.
Wow.
Made them 1.7 million the first 6 months.
Wow.
So coming into Nome, I got through the bridge. Rest of the trip was fairly good. I remember coming to Koya, it was dark at night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you could see the lights of Koya. You knew you were going to be there. And I thought, well, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and maybe I can be there by 9 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning, I was still mushing, and I couldn't even see Koya. Sun was up and everything. I mushed all that day and into the next night, and there was the lights of Koya again. And I hadn't even got to that checkpoint. It is a long stretch from that checkpoint to Koya, from the checkpoint I was at to Koya. Probably the longest and anxious one you wanted to get to. More anxious than coming to Nome. Because I lived in Nome, so it was like going home to me. And so, and I had run most of the Nome route all the way from Elam up. That was my training ground when I went up there in the wintertime for snowmobile and everything else. So anyhow, got to Elam. The rest of it was pretty much a piece of cake. There was one area before we got to Elam where, we were at Eagle Island. That's what it was, Eagle Island, and extreme cold, 65 below. And there were 7 of us that were stuck in a bunch of blizzard. I mean, one right after another. Snow down up to high. And unlike today, there were no trail breakers. They had a trail breaker for the first musher. First person that went out, they trail braked, for him. But the rest of us, there was nothing. So we had to break trail. There were 7 of us bunched up because of this weather. And so we would take turns with our team, because you can wear out a dog really quick, going through that thick snow. And you're out there with your snowshoes packing it down and everything. And so these dogs worked wonderfully going through there. The 7 of us were stuck at Eagle River because Iditarod decided not to fly any more supplies in. There were 10 or 12 teams in the back of the pack. We were 7 of those. And they decided that you guys are taking too long. Well, we're not taking too long because we're stuck. I mean, you fix the weather and we'll get there. And so they weren't going to give us any help. All the other mushers had used up all the heat for burning and cooking. So we kind of improvised. We ended up, cutting down scraps of wood that we saw along and made fire, and helped each other as far as cooking goes and things like that there. And we made a pact that until we get to the next checkpoint, we're gonna run tandem, one right after another, because the weather was so bad. And Iditarod told us not to, and they weren't going to be supporting. They decided not to support us, so we decided you do what you have to do. And we went together. And we ended up traveling almost the whole team within miles of each other, all 7 of us. And when we came into Nome, the Magnificent 7 came in like one right after another. And I was the first one to come into Nome, and another team came in like 2 minutes behind me, so it's like the first time under the Rural Arch we had 2 teams side by side, and Iditarod was freaking out how to handle that. And we kept telling the dogs know what they're doing. They will stay in their lines, and now it's commonplace. Later on in the years I became checker in Nome. Like I said, 47 years of helping and with Iditarod. Most of those years is final checker in Nome. So I have checked in as many as 5 teams under that arch at one time. And as a checker, that's like a nightmare. Not so much worried about where the dogs, and The driver knows where to put those teams under the arch, but getting the times down. I mean, you want the exact times. I'm taking you in. Here comes another one there. Let's go over here and be able to have the clock set for each one of them. So it was a challenge. So I don't know how much time. Now I'm going to get into something a little bit different. And this is a little bit what people have heard about. I own the Leonhard Seppala House. It was given to me back in the 80s by a bar owner who was a friend of mine, and we were talking about history, and he talked about the Leonhard Seppala House being history, and he does not like Iditarod. He did not like dogs. And I said, no, but that's history. You got to do something with that. And he says, what are you going to do with it? I said, it ought to be preserved, at least into a museum for honoring Seppala. You want it? I said, what? He goes, you want it? You can have it. Okay. So word got around that Lenhar owned the Seppala House. And I hadn't done anything with it because he was renting it out to Eskimos that were staying there and everything else. And the only early picture I can have or found and is in existence, the house that we have found, was taken in 1932. It's in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. It's listed there as being Leonhard Seppala House on Bering Street, south of 2nd Street, on the east side looking northeast. And that's where the house was when I got it.
What year was it again?
Pardon?
What year did you think it was?
This was 1938, I guess. And
Thank you.
of course, over the years, it has changed. There's Seppala in one of his cabins. It could have been the Seppala house, putting firewood into a stove to heat up the cabin. Boy, I've gone off a rabbit trail here. That's one of his cabins. Leonhard Seppala's brother came over from Norway to help with the mines. He became partners with Gunnar Kirsten, who brought Alto into Nome with Serum, brother. So he had two brothers, and they had a cabin together. And it was on Front Street, very close to where the Seppala house that I owned was. And one of them got up in the morning, go to the bathroom or do whatever, and he was lighting the stove, kicked over the oil, and caught the place on fire. It burnt down, both of them lost their lives. And up until maybe 15 years ago, after doing a lot of tracking down and stuff, I found out where the two were buried. And so now it's pretty well known where the Seppala and Kirsten are buried. But I have taken people from Norway who have come in here and wanted to know where they were, where their kin was buried, and even the mayor didn't know where. He goes, but Lenhar does. And so they would call Lenhar, and I'd take them out there in the middle of the snow, and we'd dig down through 4 feet of snow, and I'd find the grave. So that's a cool story that Seppala brother ends up going to Nome and working too. So the Seppala house was used for a lot of things. I said earlier that it was used for rental. At one time it was used for a house of bargains, that you could go in there and shop like flea market. It was number 14 on the Nome walking trail. When I first moved to Nome, we had 3,000 tourists a week come into Nome. And we had lots of hotels. And it was sponsored by Alaska Airlines. So they would come in, they would spend the night, they would take a tour on a bus all over out into the mountains and whatever, and they were given a copy of a walking tour. And the walking tour, number 14, was the Seppala house. That goes back probably about 60 years. So that house was on Bering Street for at least 60 years. Fast forward to, what, 2 years ago? Sent a crew up from Maine to redo the Seppala House. I raised money to have it moved. It had to be moved right away. The city was going to tear down vacant buildings. They had 5 of them set for destruction. And I'm in Pennsylvania, and I get a call from a friend of mine out in Willow, and she goes, "Hey, Urtha, you own the Seppala House, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I sent you a link. You better click on it and call me back." The link gave a report from the Nome City Council that 5 houses were set for demolished. Seppala House was one of them. So I didn't even call her back. I called the mayor, who was a friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, Bob, don't do anything until I get up there." And I'm coming up there for Iditarod, obviously. And so put a hold on the Seppala House. I'll take care of it when I get there. And he agreed to do that. But when I met with him, he gave me a time period it had to be moved off the property of the guy who gave me the house, or they would destroy it. So in the midst of Iditarod and checking people in and trying to get some sleep and everything else, I end up contacting some contractors in Nome who were friends of mine, and they agreed to move the building for $3,000. "But where do you want it moved?" And I said, "I don't know." So I end up not having $3,000 for Iditarod, or because I was at Iditarod. I went to the mayor again and I said, "Do you have any kind of block grants or anything that you can come up with some money to help me? Because I'm going to move this house, but, you know, they need money to move it." He says, "Well, how much do you need?" And I said, "Well, I pay Roger $3,000. So lo and behold, he called me later the day and he says, "We have a block grant for $10,000 coming up. I can't give it all to you, but if you write something up, what it's going to, I'll see what I can do." Lo and behold, thank God, $3,000 came into my pocket that I was able to give Roger. He moved the house, but to where? So I went to the mayor again and I said, "I'm leaving town in 2 days." And I said, "I don't know where I'm going to put this thing." He said, "Don't worry about it. Right outside of town, we keep all of our heavy equipment stored in an area that's fenced in, and we dig it out, get it out in the wintertime, and that's how we open up the roads and, you know, this, that, and the other." He says, "You can have them move it out there and put it in a corner out of the way of the heavy equipment, and that'll be fine." So I told Roger, "You have any problem? You see the mayor?" The mayor told me it goes out to the dump. That we call it the dump because it was a dump before they changed it. And so I'm back home, get a call from Roger. The house is secure. He sends me some pictures. It's fenced in and everything. And Iditarod comes around another year. And I walk coming down, you know, in one, St. Joe's Church where they were having a craft fair, and the mayor's secretary bumps in and she says, "Hi, Urtha, glad to see you. Good, must be Iditarod time again." And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, by the way, you owe us $3,000. And her husband, who I paid to move the house, was standing in back of her. And I said, "What's it for?" She goes, "For moving the house." I said, "Roger, I paid you." And he shook his head, "Yeah." He was quiet. And I said, "So Roger got his money, what are you doing?" "We moved the house again." I said, "You moved my house without telling me. You have my phone number that you can contact me. Richard knows me very well. You can email me, you can phone call, you never did that." "Well, you still owe us $3,000. "Well, where'd you move it to?" They moved to the formal dump now, which is, 6 miles out of town. And it's fenced in and everything, but wouldn't you let the person know that we're going to move your building and then send them a bill? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, right.
So I told her, I said, I'm not paying any bill. You guys moved it without telling me. It's on your dime. So I got together with the mayor, and he knew nothing about it. And he got kind of frustrated and was kind of angry at me that I said, I'm not going to pay it. He said, well, you have to. I said, no, I didn't. I wasn't told I'm not paying it. And we ended up making up and hugging each other afterwards. But I never paid it $3,000. That's where the Seppala House is today. So the team that I sent up from Maine to work on it took the thing apart piece by piece. And this is what they found inside one of the walls. So we now knew where it came from. It was a prefab home. And back during the 1900s, late 1800s, that's the way they brought homes up from Seattle. Prefab, like we have around here now. Put them together. So this Seppala house at one time was a prefabbed home. And Jonathan was there, and he's the one that called me and said, you'll never guess what I just found. And he found a bunch of other things that were really interesting. You want to tell him a little bit about that?
Back in the early 1900s, they didn't have much in the way of entertainment. So what they would do is they'd hang sheets on the wall, and they would take newspaper clippings of beautiful photos and beautiful paintings. They'd take these little clippings out of newspapers or magazines or whatever, and they would glue them to these sheets, and that would be like their pictures, their entertainment. Well, the walls inside the Seppala house had layer upon layer upon layer of wallpaper and other installations. So we're digging through all this stuff, and then I find a sheet with pictures, with battleships, that all dated to the the last decade of the 1800s and the first decade of the 1900s. Newspaper clippings, everything validating like exactly the dates that this house was being made.
What else did you find?
Oh, it was really great that what they did with these prefab houses is they make horsehair insulation in slides that would just slide down between the posts. Actually, these houses would probably go together faster than prefab houses today. So you'd have these big posts with grooves in them, and then there would be a horsehair. It looks like a filter for some kind of air conditioning system, but it's horsehair, and it would slide right down between the posts, just like a filter. It was really neat. They had ideas back then too.
Yeah. Wow. You gotta, you use what you got, huh?
So Jonathan calls me, tells me about all this wonderful stuff he found, that documents the house, and says, what do you want me to do with it? And I said, we'll just put it on hold for now because I'm still mesmerized by the fact that we're tearing the house apart to rebuild it. And he said, why don't we take it over and give it to the museum? And that way we can get them interested in the project and what we're doing. And I said, it's a great idea. So he went over to the museum curator and gave the stuff from the Seppala house. This is the way I bought it, or the way I moved it. That's how disrepair it was. It really sad shape. Most of you have been mesmerized by the cards that I have up here about the Iditarod belt buckle. So I'm going to pass my Iditarod belt buckle. You only get one of these, and the only way you get it is to finish the Iditarod. So I can do the race 20 times. 1991, stamped right on here. That's when I finish. That man can back there watch him. Do not let him put it in his.
I don't want it unless I earn it.
That's the way.
As much as I envy it, I don't want it unless I can earn it.
So we talked about trail mail earlier. I go back to when trail mail first started. And it was designed primarily to commemorate the Iditarod Trail, the original mail route. And so we had different people in Nome and in Anchorage design trail mail. And so the mayor in 1991, actually been 1990, asked me if I would design the 1991 trail mail. So I designed it and I carried my own mail up the trail. So I think I have it here. There, you can pass that around. And then I carried, for my sponsors, I carried my own mail that I designed and sent that up the trail with me.
So after that, is that when trail mail became a thing?
Pardon?
After you did that, is that when trail mail became a thing or no?
It was before, a couple of years before that is when it became a thing. And then later on it was turned over, I mean within the past 15 years or so it was turned over to your group to do it. So, but it was designed by the Nome Kennel Club. They hoped to have sold that and the money would go into the Nome Kennel Club. But I remember going to the mayor's office and he would have boxes and boxes of trail mail that Iditarod never put out for sale. And when I tried to find out what happened to it, and the mayor ends up, after numerous years, moves down to Fairbanks, and I said, Leo, what'd you do with the trail mail? He goes, I sent it all to Iditarod. And I said, what'd they do with it? And he started laughing. Went in the dump. This stuff it was collectibles. So, and that's, I don't know whether I haven't been to a banquet in 5 or 6 years, but it's usually somebody has a full collection of trail mail. And you can tell the first one because it's a small envelope. It's not the big legal size. It's a smaller envelope. And Carl Huntington won that race. And that was the other thing that was neat about Iditarod. The first race was we had a native win the race. And that's what Joe Reddington wanted, is to get native interest in it. I'm going to do show and tell here a little bit, so bear with me.
Love it.
Hurry up, my belt buckle, my pants are full. Here's Norman. Here's Norman.
This is getting interesting. We might keep that belt buckle a little bit longer.
Good book on Joe Reddington. It's a very good book. If you don't have it, please pick it up and read it sometime. Norman Bond. Norman Bond wrote 2 books. Norman's an interesting character. He was with Admiral Byrd when Byrd first flew over the South Pole. And he was a dog handler at 17 years old for Byrd. He wrote a book called With Byrd at the Bottom of the World. He also wrote a second book that's really interesting. It's My Life. And there he is with the pup. So I told you about the Kool-Aid trick in the finish line. And one of the mushers...
Here, let me get a picture of this.
His wife's back there.
You guys are something.
She's seen it.
We had...
Come on here. Yeah, there we go. Take the picture so we can get his belt buckle back.
Get that belt buckle going quick. So we had fun with Iditarod in the early years. As a matter of fact, some of the old mushers used to play games up the trail. We had one year where we had what do you call him? An unknown musher. And he wore black the whole way, over his face and everything. Nobody knew who he was until he came into the finish line. And so, then we had Red Fox Olson. And Red Fox Olson ran a couple of the early Iditarods. And he came up with the idea that how does the people in these villages know who the last musher is? You know, they've had 30 mushers go through, and how do they know which one's the last one? Well, Red Fox was always the last one. So he made up signs that would say the end. The guy in front of him had the word the, and he would have the word end. Red Fox Olson did not like the idea that we didn't have something bigger at the finish line for the mushers to know where they're going. And so he went back to his hometown in Fairbanks, and he had a big forest full of trees, and he ends up making the barrel arch, the original barrel arch. And if you've been there, the rec center where you had the finishers banquet, the original barrel arch is hanging up there. And so he wrote a book about how the barrel arch came about. And there's a funny story about that, is that he called the mayor, Leo, and said, I made a final arch for Iditarod, so mushers know where to come. And I said, great. How much do we owe you? And, oh, nothing. I did it on my own. So Iditarod ends up getting a call from Leo Rasmussen and saying, I need money. And the president of Iditarod says, what for? He says, there's an airway bill out here for $3,200 for a piece of wood. And who's it from? It's from Red Fox Olson. So the president of Iditarod calls Red Fox and says, I made it, you guys want it, and you got to pay for it, pay for the freight. So we end up scraping money together, and that's how the original arch got in place. You know, back then, we did not have digital photography. Cameras froze up very easily, and so that's why you're not seeing a lot of slides today with my presentation. Matter of fact, the only picture other than the start that I showed you that somebody took, this was taken in Unalakleet. And one of my teachers in Nome flew down to Unalakleet because she had students that came from Unalakleet, and she also wanted to be there to see me come in. That's the only picture I have of me on the trail.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm resting, but I had a belt buckle in.
Check Julie's purse.
Urtha, did you have previous experience running dogs before 91?
What's that?
Did you have previous experience
I'm
running
sorry.
dogs?
Did I?
Run dogs before 91?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was up in Kotzebue, that's dog mushing area.
Okay.
And so I didn't own any, but I ran other people's.
Well, I heard that you did training. I was just wondering what your experience was.
So you've seen the musher cards, and that goes back to early Iditarod. One of the early Iditarod mushers owns a printing company in Wasilla. And Levon Barbie came up with this idea that, you know, I ran Iditarod 6 times, ought to be commemorated. So his wife took a picture, he ends up making a mushing card, was passing it out to all us other mushers, and we said, hey, that's kind of neat. Well, do you want one? So Levon ended up getting a real good business by mushers having musher cards. That is nothing new. That goes back to Leonhard Seppala. Leonhard Seppala was so important during the heyday that Bubba Bubblegum made cards for famous people.
No.
Here is an original Leonhard Seppala card.
Oh, how did you get it?
I have two of them. One of them, I was going to show you the slide, but I couldn't find it. It was the KTU television in Anchorage interviewed me, the head producer, and when he interviewed me and John Van Zyl, he said, I want to make the first contribution to the Seppala House. And he came out with the musher card. And then I was able to find this somewhere else.
eBay.
Okay, back to Norman Vaughn. Told you that he was at the bottom of the world. He was 17 years old. He's now in his 60s and 70s, and he meets up with a friend in Atlanta, Georgia, where his wife is from, 30 years younger than him, and they get to talking about an expedition to Antarctica, or to Greenland, Pat Epps wants to find the B-17 and the 6 P-38s that landed on the Greenland ice cap during World War II because they had to turn around because they were running out of fuel. And all 7 planes landed, nobody was hurt. Norman was in the military at that time as Air Force Dog Rescue Team. So they contacted him and said, could you put a team together and go up and rescue the guys that crashed? Norman said, yeah. So they got 4 teams together, marched into the Greenland ice cap, and submarines had already come and rescued the guys. So the planes were there. So they kind of disgruntled, they turned around, went back. Is that my belt buckle? Yes, sir. You're a hero. So they turn around and go back, and they get back and they're debriefed about their journey. And the commanding officer said, did you save the best kept secret of World War II? And Norman says, what are you talking about? Well, the best kept secret of World War II is the Northern Bomb Sight. Northern Bomb Sight is what they use in B-17, so see down through the clouds and give you an accurate distance of how far it is from the plane so that they can give a realistic time period when to drop the bombs. And they did not want the Germans to get their hands on it. Norman says, no, we didn't know anything about it. So what they did is they ended up asking Norman to go back up. And so he and another team mushed back up to the B-17, and then they were told to destroy it. Well, you got to know Norman. We're not destroying nothing. We're taking the thing home. So he ripped it out and brought it home. He got all sorts of accommodations.
Wow.
Later on, he meets Pat Epps down in Georgia. Pat Epps is wanting as a pilot, and he wants to dig down, find the planes, and bring them up and get them running and flying home. Because they thought it would only be covered by like maybe 5 feet of snow and ice. It ended up being 261 feet below the surface. But if you ever go down to see the Ark encounter, one of the rooms down there talks about the Ice Age and whatever. They have a picture of how they went down to rescue those planes. Norman went down. He went down with that crew, and they used what they call a gopher. It's about this big around. It looks like a plumb ball. Plumb ball is when you're trying to get things straight up and down. And this one shot out hot water. And so as it spun, hot water would come out, and they had a hose that sucked the water. It would melt the ice, and they had a hose that sucked out the water. And after grueling 3 months, they got down and they hit metal. So they sent a team down with chisels and everything else. They found out that yes, they had actually landed on top of B-17, 270-some feet below the ice. So Norman was the first one of the first ones to go down when they actually steamed part of the plane off. The original pilot of that B-17 was still alive, and he told Norman, because Norman was old, this guy was old, he goes, if you're there, if the seat is intact, reach your right hand down along the seat and bring back what you find. There was a flask of whiskey. It was there. So here's a picture of Norman down 277 feet, sitting inside the B-17. It had crushed. They could not fly it out, but they were able to salvage all the 50 caliber machine guns and the 50 caliber bullets and all this kind of thing. And he gave me one of the 50 caliber bullets that's probably in the basement with all my other memorabilia that I forgot. Well, after Iditarod, or actually, yeah, it was after Iditarod, Norman and I would hang out a lot together. He had double knee replacements.
Yeah.
And his wife worked. He didn't have a way of getting to therapy and all this. And he was a cantankerous old kid. And so I offered to take him to therapy. He was scheduled for 3 days a week. He said, no, I'm going 5 days a week. And he'd go in there and they say, we want you to do 10 of the leg thrusts. No, he had to do 15 to 20. So he recuperated relatively easily. But during that time period, his wife said, we're paying storage units. We have 6 storage units that we're paying money to, and I have not even, she was married, so I have not even seen these storage units. Norman, you need to get rid of the stuff that's in there, we haven't seen it, and save money. So I told Norman I'd help him out. So we went out to one of the storage units, and we worked like a dog, moving stuff out and throwing stuff away. And now Norman's 80-some years old, 86, almost 90 years old at this time. And all of a sudden, he's in the storage unit, and I'm hauling stuff out of the truck, and I hear, oh my! Now the guy's old, and I'm thinking, oh, good grief, he had a heart attack. So I drop what I'm running, and I said, Norman, you all right? Hell yes, but look what I found. You'll never believe it. He pulls out this garbage bag. Garbage bags over a lot of years go from that dark color, black color, to brown. And he pulls out this old, and I was expecting it to crumble, but he pulls it out, and he reaches inside, and as soon as he gets about that far out of the bag, I knew exactly what it was. And when he pulled the rest of it out, I said, that is Bird's cushion that he sat on in the Ford Tri-Motor. And it was. And I yelled at him. I said, you stupid old geezer. I said, this should be in a museum. It's been sitting in this stupid storage unit for 20-some years. He goes, oh, longer than that. I said, well, I know someone. Not only am I giving you heck, but when you get home tonight, Carolyn's going to jump all over you. And she did. So, and in that bag were mittens that they were handmade. And on the bird expedition, they had someone embroider the names of who those mittens were for, who the socks were for, who the vests were for, and who the mucklucks were for. And Norman had all that. I was so angry at him. That's in the museum.
Is it in a museum now?
I don't know. When Norman died at 100 years old, like 4 days after 100 years old, they had his wake or whatever down in the Egan Center, which is right downtown. And I went in with Senator Ted Stevens. He and I went together. And out in the lobby, they had long tables that I guess if you put all these together, that's how many it would be. That would be Norman's history. And on those tables was that stuff he had pulled out. So I don't know what happened to it after that. One thing that he did have that was interesting, and we talked about this the other day, is Norman had leather harnesses that look very similar to this. And those are the ones that they used during the bird expedition. And they were like a horse collar back in the day. And so, and it was all leather. All leather. And it did have a padding which was made out of horsehair. So that was really interesting. It's history alone, just every day walking with him and working with him was history in the making. One person I admire so much in Alaska is a lady that lives out in Willow, and she writes consistently about dog mushing. I don't think she's ever been on a dog sled, but Helen Henninger.
Oh, yeah.
And this one talks about what the mushers back in the heyday did with the gold rush and so forth. Very interesting. She has one out. I think it just recently came out. She sent it to me here a couple months ago, and it's about the Iditarod Trail, the very first Iditarod Trail, and the very first Iditarod. Well, let's go back to Nome a little bit. Nome had lots of mushers during that time period, and one of the people in Nome who father ran the mercantile store was Esther Bradshaw Darling. And if you have not yet gotten any of her books, they're very hard to find. I recommend them because she was a tough broad. I'm telling you. She ran dogs, and she helped Seppala, and she helped a lot of the mushers in the All-Alaska Sweepstakes. By the way, Leonhard Seppala he started and ran the All-Alaska Sweepstakes and won it 3 times. 3 times in a row.
Oh my God.
So that alone makes him kind of a hero musher, at least in Nome. So this is the book that I like about what that Esther wrote, because she's using third-party people, but this is actually what happened when she was in Nome and getting dog teams together. Baldy of Nome. Then she wrote one, grandson of Baldy. A number of years ago, trying to think of names, I am so terrible with names. Phillips. Her last name's Phillips. Her husband was a state senator, and she thought that the mushers ought to be commemorated other than just getting a belt buckle. And so she got together with some of the people down in Juneau, and they got a brass plaque, and lo and behold, it was sent to the city of Nome. We didn't have to pay the freight. It's a big plaque about that wide and at least that high. It takes almost 2 people to lift it. But at the time period, it lists all the finishers and the year that they finished. And this is dedicated, it's 33 years of competition in Nome, Alaska by Leah Rasmussen, Mayor John Handelin. So the mayor's actually helped out with this too, and Elizabeth Gustafson presented to the city of Nome. Somewhere on there is my name.
Yes.
Down on 4th Avenue every summer, right in front of the big yellow building on the corner is a guy that has his sled set up, and he's always trying to sell his books. And Rod Perry actually ran the very first Iditarod. And he's very proud of that. And he lets people know he's a very good author. He wrote 2 books, they're Trailbreakers, Trailbreaker 1, Trailbreaker 2. And I strongly recommend, it's a good read. It's a very good read. Rod was also instrumental in getting the new arch put up across 4th Avenue, for the start of the race. And they raised like $100,000 in no time at all, and I can't raise $20,000 for this to finish it off. And let's see, where's my little clicker? Hello.
No, it's the other clicker.
Does it work? Oh, there it is.
Yep.
Wrong one. So we moved the house out of town to the first dump, and that's what it looked like when they moved it. Boarded up all the windows, had big straps across it to hold it together. They were afraid it would fall apart because it was so fragile when they moved it. It had been sitting where it's at for over 60 years. And I was glad to see that I got the house moved. And in 2018, when I saved the house, it made big time news all over the Anchorage. I mean, all over Alaska, because newspapers were interviewing me about it, TV cameras came up and they were interviewing me, and I'd take them out and show them the house because, you saved a piece of history. And that's what it's all about for me, is saving and preserving history. These are the dimensions that I ended up getting drawn up, and the crew that went up there had those to work with. As far as when the building was torn down, they're hand drawn, but they were pretty accurate. And it ended up giving how far it was between the window and the next one and so forth. So that gives you an idea of some of the stuff. There they are, starting it. And when I got that picture, I just about flipped out. Because I'm in Pennsylvania, they're in Nome, and that's what I had seen before. And I get this, and I am just in tears. This is going to be a reality. Now what they've done is the wood is so bad. Most of it was old plywood, so it would crumble when they tried to move it or anything. So a lot of the stuff that they found, they preserved, like some of the 2x4s and 2x6s, and kept some of the wood, kept it in the house, so that when the inside of the house is finally finished, that wood can be incorporated inside. Yes?
We also incorporated some of the 4x4s into the floor. Whatever pieces of lumber were still significant enough to bear weight, we incorporated them into the building. The thing was, the moment we got up there, we realized we cannot renovate this building. It's going to collapse on our heads if we try to renovate this building. So we dismantled it and then incorporated it in with the new materials.
Which is what I had originally wanted, and so I was very pleased with the progress they made and what they did. Prior to this, I'm doing all this from 4,000 miles away. I'm calling a Lowe's in Anchorage. I'm ordering my supplies and I had a good idea of how much supplies I would need, and the supplies weren't the problem. It's the airway bill getting it up there. And so I was stuck on that until we ended up raising some more money to pay the airway bill. And I told them to finally release it. I'm going to deposit the money in your account down there to cover the airway bill. So the material got up there and set out the Nome airport, and when the guys went up there, they couldn't find it. It was inside the hangar. They had moved it inside the hangar, and so a whole day was wasted. These guys only had 7 days in Nome because they had to be back in Maine. And the work that they did was absolutely incredible in 7 days. You think I broke in tears on that first picture? When I saw this, I'm going nuts. Now this is after the main crew left. There was a guy that just out of nowhere helped them out from Nome. He was actually only been there a short period of time. His significant other worked at the hospital. She was only there like 3 months, and then she had a 3-month vacation, that type of thing. And he went out and talked to them and said, if you need any help, well, he volunteered, and when they left, he said he'd keep on if I wanted him. I said, yeah. So he did most of this himself.
Actually, I took that photo.
You did?
Yeah, he did siding after we left.
Did siding.
So we did that.
And there's when we first got it out to the first dump. Notice the little building behind it.
How far?
That little dollhouse.
Oh,
I call it, in town it's known as the dollhouse. At least it was in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
I'm just going by the name.
In 1976 was the bicentennial of our country, and I was asked by the city manager if I would create a park and a visitor center. And it was at the site that was leveled off after the flood of 74, the flood wiped out City Hall. City Hall used to sit where the visitor center is now. And they built a new City Hall across the street on higher ground. I was in charge of the building a park. So my neighbor at the time, grown and raised in Nome, had this sitting in his backyard. I said, Don, that would be a great asset to my park. You come and get it. He said, I have to clean around it all the time. I said, okay, draw off a piece of paper saying that you're donated to the Bicentennial Park, and he did. We moved it. City gave me access to anything back then. I had bulldozers, front end loaders, everything. And so I moved this down, repainted it, cleaned up the inside. It was a house built by a sea-bearing person who lived in Nome. He was always out at sea. Came back and he lived in this thing. Everything inside that was like the cabin of a ship. You know, you had a wall here, you undo a hook, there came your bunk bed. In another room, you had a wall here, unhooked, and there came a table for sitting. I mean, it was incredible. So I saved that building, painted it. It was used as a visitor center until Nome got rich. Somebody gave him a lot of money. You and I did. It was government gave him a lot of money, and they built the new visitor center, which is awesome. And this was moved down the street to the Nugget Inn. Sat in front of the Nugget Inn for, at least 20 years. And finally, the owner, who was Korean of the Nugget Inn, at one time, a couple of years ago, said, I don't want that in front of the building anymore. So the city didn't know what to do with it. They moved it out here to the storage area for their heavy equipment. And that's where they wanted the Seppala House put out there with it. Both those buildings now reside at the real city dump, which is a shame. So I have plaques made up over each door saying the Seppala House. Here's the interior today. This is the way the building stands right now. So it's insulated, no walls on the inside, and the paneling or whatever is not put up because I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. Aaron Burmeister said, we'll just get some plywood that is 4-foot sheets of plywood. We'll put it up and stain it. Well, that's good, but that looks like a cabin that I would build today up there if I was building. I want wood rustic wood from out on the tundra, from the buildings like the Seppala House was, that's sitting there that they're going to tear down. I want all that wood, and I want it attached like an old cabin. Whether that happens, I don't know. And Aaron knows what I wanted, and Aaron's my Nome contact right now. So it is coming along.
Yes.
And a lot of people are saying, what's taking so long? What's taking so long is money.
Yeah.
Because I have not received any grant. I have not received anything. And this is when the contractor that I paid after my main crew left to shore everything up for the winter and paint it. And what he did when he painted it is he stained it. And I said, I don't want it stained. That's going to bring out a darker wood. He goes, no, I can put your paint inside the stain and that'll protect the wood longer. And we sent me that picture. I said, did you stain it? He goes, yeah, the stain's already there. He said, that'll last longer than if you'd have just painted it. That's it today.
Oh.
And
Wow.
again, it's tough for me to see this because it's come a long ways and we're so close. We're really so close. Dip, that's all, folks.
That's Urtha Lenhar, a man who was there when it all began. If you've listened to all 3 of these Iditarod EDU talks, thanks for sticking with us through the whole series. If this is the first one you've caught, then go back and listen to the other 2. My talk on the Centennial Seppala Expedition and Cat Langlais on what it really takes to be a winning musher. And if this has moved you, the history, the race, the restoration, share it and send it to someone who loves this world as much as we do. That's how projects like the Seppala House finds the support that they deserve and need. Make sure that you're subscribed and don't miss what's coming next. You can find more from us at mushmain.com, or you can follow us on social media at mushmain, or you can reach out to me directly at jonathannathanielhayes@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep your line tight and your eyes on the trail. This has been The Explorer.